The Symbiotic Strain Horror Story. Chapter 1. Entering the Woods. The deep maple forests of the Rocky Mountains were unusually quiet in late summer, with sunlight filtering through the dense canopy, casting dappled shadows on the dirt road. Liam, Maya, Noah, Chloe, and Sam, 5 recent college graduates, drove their old SUV, kicking up dust as they headed towards their secluded cabin. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, punctuated by a few distant bird calls, allowing them to momentarily forget the city's clamor and the uncertainties of post-graduation life. "Hey, Maya, are you sure there's reception out here?" Noah waved his phone helplessly in the air, a hint of technological abandonment on his face. As the tech-savvy one in the group, losing internet connection made him more uncomfortable than the others. Maya chuckled, ever the calm and practical medical student. "That's why we're here, Noah, to disconnect and enjoy nature. Besides, I don't want to be dealing with your allergies in an emergency." Chloe, a free spirit, had already rolled down her window and taken a deep breath. "Smell that air. This is living." Liam, their unofficial leader, parked the SUV beside a vine-covered trail. "We're here. Looks even more secluded than the pictures." He pointed to the dimly visible cabin through the trees. Sam, always a bit more cautious than the rest, checked the buckles on his backpack. "I always get a feeling something's going to happen in places like this," he muttered, drawing playful jabs from Noah and Chloe. The cabin was older than they expected but felt cozy, filled with the scent of wood and fireplace smoke. After settling in, Liam suggested they explore the nearby creek. Noah eagerly followed, his action camera in hand, hoping to capture some cool footage. They walked upstream along the creek, the water gurgling over moss-covered stones. Suddenly, Noah stopped, pointing to the base of a fallen, dead tree. "Liam, look at this." In the shadows beneath the dead tree, a patch of bizarre, bioluminescent fungi glowed faintly, like tiny blue stars scattered across the damp earth. They came in various shapes, some like miniature umbrellas, others resembling eerie tentacles. "Whoa, this is so cool!" Noah excitedly pulled out his phone to take pictures, even touching one lightly with his fingertip. Liam, curious, also leaned in, brushing aside fallen leaves for a clearer look. He inadvertently inhaled tiny spores drifting in the air, a feeling like dust entering his nostrils, making him sneeze softly. These could make some awesome photos. Noah carefully broke off a few glowing pieces of fungus and put them in a plastic bag. "We can take them back and show Maya. Maybe she'll know what they are." They returned to the cabin with their trophies, completely unaware that they had brought back more than just a forest wonder. They had brought back something ancient and stirring. Chapter 2. The Incubation. Initially, the atmosphere in the cabin was light and carefree. The friends sat around the fireplace playing cards, using the brought-back fungi as novel decorations. As night fell, the faint glow from the fungi looked remarkably beautiful in the darkness. However, a few days later, a subtle unease began to spread among them. Chloe was the first to notice something unusual. She found several faint green lines, like intersecting tree roots, appearing beneath the skin of her forearm. "What the hell is this?" she asked Maya, initially thinking it was some kind of insect bite. After examining it, Maya shook her head in confusion. Doesn't look like a bite, more like veins, but the color's all wrong. Next was Sam. He developed a persistent cough, his voice growing hoarse. At first, it was just a dry cough, but soon he began expelling viscous, stringy phlegm. Probably just caught a cold. He tried to reassure himself, but the worry in his eyes deepened daily. Noah, who had first touched the fungus, found his fingertips becoming numb, and small, hard nodules appeared beneath his fingernails. Am I playing too many video games? Getting stiff fingers? He joked, but a sharp pain shot through his fingertips when he tried to pick at the nodules. Maya, as the only medical student, started to feel that something was seriously wrong. She leafed through her medical textbooks, trying to identify the source of these symptoms, but found nothing. These symptoms are too disparate. They don't fit any known infection or allergy. There was a rare hint of anxiety in her voice. Liam, the group's leader, tried to remain optimistic. Maybe it's just the change of environment? Let's drink more water and see. But he himself felt a growing dryness in his throat and occasionally found himself subconsciously scratching his neck. The cabin's atmosphere gradually grew heavier. Laughter diminished, replaced by uneasy glances exchanged between them. They tried to find a signal on their phones, but, predictably, it was still blank. The forest seemed to grow quieter. The sound of the creek no longer felt relaxing but rather eerie. One night, Chloe lay in bed, feeling the veins beneath her skin subtly wriggle. She turned to look out the window. In the moonlight, the forest's tree shadows stretched like countless grasping hands, as if swallowing the cabin whole. An inexplicable dread kept her awake through the night. They didn't know that the seemingly harmless fungal spores had silently infiltrated their bodies, initiating a terrifying rewrite at the cellular level. Chapter 3: The Assimilation. In the days that followed, the friends' bodies began to deform at an alarming rate. The green veins on Chloe's arms grew thicker, even starting to protrude from her skin, forming vine-like textures. She tried to scratch them, but the eerie wriggling sensation intensified, as if something alive was growing and breathing beneath her skin. Her voice became hoarse, a wet hiss emanating from deep within her throat. Sam's cough escalated to a nauseating degree. Each violent cough was accompanied by thick mucus and dark green, root-like fungal growths spewing from his mouth. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin a sickly grayish green, and he struggled to breathe, his lungs seemingly occupied by something living. The nodules on Noah's fingertips had completely transformed. They hardened, swelled, and finally burst through the skin, becoming sharp, dark-glowing chitinous spikes, like insect limbs. His hands became twisted and clumsy, unable to hold his camera, making even simple movements difficult. Maya, the medical student, was on the verge of collapse. She frantically examined the fungal samples, observing their cellular structures under a magnifying glass, only to find despairing complexity. She tried to cut one open with a knife. The fungus oozed a viscous liquid with a pungent, sweet decay smell. She realized this wasn't just an infection, but a living fusion. We're turning into monsters. Noah choked out the words, tears streaming down his contorted face. Liam, though not yet showing obvious external deformities, was consumed by fear and despair. He watched his friends struggle in agony, their once familiar faces becoming alien and grotesque. The cabin was filled with the stench of decay, a nauseating sweet decay, and slimy fluids, the air thick with desperate gasps and occasional, inhuman, wet-sounding screeches. Communication became incredibly difficult. Chloe and Sam could no longer speak clearly. Their vocal cords and mouths seemed to be overtaken by fungal structures, producing only muffled whimpers and sounds like popping bubbles. Their movements became slow and clumsy, as if pulled by unseen threads. Fear began to twist their minds. Sam, driven by physical pain, grew agitated and aggressive, trying to attack Liam several times. Chloe, meanwhile, fell into a semi-comatose state, her body twitching intermittently, the textures on her skin spreading to her face, blurring her features. Liam and Maya desperately tried to find an escape. They rushed to the SUV, only to find its tires flat and the engine dead. The tiny fungal spores had apparently infiltrated everywhere, even the machinery. Their fine tendrils had seeped into the tire rubber and engine crevices. Outside the cabin, the forest looked even more ominous. They felt trapped by some unseen force, completely cut off from the outside world. They were no longer just sick. They were being consumed by an invisible, spreading symbiote, their bodily autonomy stripped away, their humanity gradually eroding. Chapter 4. The assimilation continued. As night deepened, the bioluminescent fungi in the cabin glowed brighter, illuminating the horrifying scene within. Sam's body had swelled, parts of his torso merging with the floor as if rooting. Chloe's body was like a broken doll, occasionally emitting bursts of spores, her screeches growing shriller, seemingly summoning something. Noah's limbs were completely stiff, and he lay on the floor in a grotesque posture, his claws deeply embedded in the wooden planks, as if ready to pounce on anything living that came near. Maya, though not yet showing obvious external deformities, felt a strange sensation deep within her body. Something seemed to surge in her blood. Each heartbeat was accompanied by an eerie itch. She realized the virus had infiltrated her bloodstream and was slowly transforming her. She looked into the last shard of a mirror, seeing faint green blood vessels appearing in the whites of her eyes. Liam looked at his three once vibrant friends, now grotesque living flora. Fear and despair engulfed him like a tidal wave. He knew they were beyond saving, and he too would likely soon follow. The cabin reeked of mold, sweet decay, and the metallic tang of blood, a nauseating composite smell. Fungus began to creep up the walls, forming disgusting colonies in damp corners, emitting their faint luminescence. The entire cabin felt like a giant petri dish for this terrifying fungus. Maya, with the last vestiges of her sanity, leafed through an old botany book. She found an ancient record of a fungus called hellroot, which described its ability to form a symbiosis with a host, ultimately transforming it into its own organism. She trembled, understanding. This wasn't a simple infection. It was a complete assimilation. This fungus didn't kill. It absorbed. Liam clutched an axe, their only remaining tool. He looked at Maya, her eyes gleaming with a final glimmer of reason and a desperate resolve. They knew that if this fungus spread, the entire world would become a colossal, fungus-infested wasteland of spores and decaying flesh. Inside the cabin, Sam's guttural gurgles, Chloe's screeches, and Noah's clawing sounds intertwined, forming a symphony of death. There was no longer any communication between them, only the instincts driven by the fungus. Liam and Maya exchanged a glance. Their mission was no longer to escape, but to prevent this terrifying symbiont from spreading. This might be their last shred of humanity, their last dignity. Chapter 5: The Last Stand. Night deepened, and the glowing fungi in the cabin cast an intensified light, vividly illuminating the horrific scene within. Sam's body had swollen, parts of his torso now fused with the floor, as if rooted. Chloe's body, meanwhile, was like a constantly sporulating nest, her screeches growing shriller, seemingly beckoning something. Noah's limbs were completely rigid. He lay on the ground in a grotesque posture, his claws deeply embedded in the wooden floor, as if ready to pounce on anything that came near. Maya felt an increasingly strong itch and a foreign sensation deep within her, knowing her time was running out. She trembling pulled a lighter and some dry kindling from her backpack. "Liam, we have to burn this place down." Her voice was hoarse, but her eyes were remarkably firm. "It's the only way. We can't let it get out." Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. He knew what this meant, not just burning the cabin, but their mutated friends and themselves. But he knew Maya was right. There was no other choice. They moved carefully, avoiding contact with the slowly writhing fungus. Sam's body was completely fixed. Chloe was like a broken doll, occasionally spurting spores. Noah's eyes, entangled by the fungus, still stared at them with a feral glint. When Liam lit the oil-soaked kindling, flames instantly devoured the dry wood, and the cabin's air was distorted by the heat. The fungus hissed eerily in the flames, its luminescence appearing even more demonic in the firelight. Sam, Chloe, and Noah, though utterly disfigured, let out heartbreaking, human-like wails in the inferno. The sounds were so desolate, as if their remaining humanity cried out in a final, desperate protest against their stolen lives and bodies. Liam and Maya stood in the flames, tears blurring their vision. They endured the intense heat, watching their former friends twist and carbonize in the fire, turning into charred ashes. However, just as the flames consumed everything, Maya suddenly felt a violent spasm. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, trembling violently. She looked at Liam, her eyes filled with terror and despair. She saw the same despair in his eyes, for he, too, felt something stirring deep within him. "Go?" Maya used her last ounce of strength, pointing outside the door, but her voice had already turned into a fungal scraping noise, and green patterns rapidly spread across her skin and face. Liam knew they couldn't turn back. The fungal spores were ubiquitous. Their fate had been sealed the moment they touched it. Burning the cabin only prevented its spread from here. It couldn't save them. He looked at Maya. She was already convulsing uncontrollably, her body stiffening. Liam felt the dryness in his throat intensifying, something taking root. He knew they too would soon become another part of this forest, another part of the pervasive fungus. The flames roared, consuming the cabin. The fire shot skyward, painting the night red. In the glow of the flames, Liam's figure slowly began to blur, eventually consumed by the fire, merging with the cursed forest. The forest fell silent, save for the occasional crackle of burning wood. Days later, everything returned to peace, leaving only charred ruins and an empty clearing. However, deeper in the woods, new, faint glows began to quietly flicker in the damp earth. Epilogue. Years later, a lone forest ranger happened upon the area. He found the charred remains of the cabin and some strange, twisted skeletons half buried in the soil. He thought little of it, assuming it was a simple forest fire accident. However, as he walked through the area, he always felt an indescribable, cold and damp sensation, as if something was silently watching him. He could always hear a subtle whisper on the wind, like hushed conversations, and he himself occasionally felt a slight itch deep in his throat, and he would unconsciously, gently touch his own skin. Deep in the forest, the glowing fungi, on the charred ground, slowly but steadily, began to spread once more.